PEBEC is a direct result of feedback. When the administration came into office in 2015, private sector immediately signaled the difficulties in doing business in Nigeria, broad range of issues. And it's not to say that no administration had tried to fix anything before, but what's unique about this administration is the coordinated effect, the output that a collaboration elicits. So the PEBEC was inaugurated in 2016, July of 2016, and it's chaired by the Vice President. His Excellency chairs monthly meetings of this council. So it's a very hands-on working meeting. About 13 other ministers. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment is the Vice Chair. You have all the ministers that need to be on the council, and the Head of Service playing a very active role as well. What this does is we're able to troubleshoot the problems that the private sector has identified and move in a collaborative manner. An important thing to mention about the PEBEC is that very quickly we realized that we couldn't do it without the National Assembly, without state governments, even the local government, and of course the private sector. So all arms and levels of government are represented on the council and private sector. So the collaboration really does work, and that's what has delivered traction for this particular intervention.
If you look back now at some of the interventions, of course we were within the kind of sanctuary of the judiciary earlier today. What would you say would be the most impactful interventions in terms of where you've gotten a lot of feedback from the private sector about their change in experience?
What we try to do is not eat an elephant. We work in a very systemic approach based on listening, based on feedback. So we have a funnel system, interaction with private sector, you distill, and then we also look at global best practices, and we pick what is going to be most pertinent and relevant. We prioritize. So what is most cogent depends on which company, which sector. We've worked on starting a business, so you have a lot of entrepreneurs that have ideas. You can literally have an idea at 4 a.m. and have that business registered by 10 a.m. in the morning. Business name reserved, and it's 24 hours for the actual registration. So it's now 4 hours to reserve a business name, and within 24 hours you can have your business registered. You can also have a link. FIRS and CAC collaborated. Those are some of our automation interventions to make sure that you can have a tax identification number alongside your certificate of incorporation. So it's things like that. Automating processes. Private sector have just told us that just the fact that there's a team listening to them and working on unbundling some of these bureaucratic bottlenecks has been very impactful for them.
A few folks asked me about what's the methodology and the ranking and the parameters used in ranking each state of the Federation and the FCT when it comes to those who are in need of doing business.
As you can guess from the earlier part of this video, we are looking at the Presidential Enabling Business Council Environment, PEBEC. We're looking at their latest report, which they published on the 27th of March concerning the subnationals rankings by PEBEC. So the subnationals are the states, the state governments, including the FCT. So PEBEC had released a survey, their biannual survey, which means that on a 2-year basis, on a 2-year period, they release the rankings of states based on their ease of doing business. So this is a video based on the report released on the 27th of March by PEBEC. So Nigeria is home to over 39.6 million MSMEs, and MSME stands for micro, small, and medium enterprise. Okay, these MSMEs comprise about 96% of all the different businesses that we have in Nigeria. 67% of these MSMEs are owned by youth. And in 2022, the MSMEs contributed over 45% to Nigeria's GDP. This is huge. 45% coming from MSMEs. Now, like I said earlier, MSMEs constitute about 97% of businesses. So just about 3% of the businesses in Nigeria are under what you may call a large-scale business, since MSME stands for micro, small, and medium enterprise. So a lot of persons have shown interest as to the parameters that guided PEBEC in determining the rankings, by the rankings of the subnationals by PEBEC. So this is what we're looking at right now. PEBEC actually expanded its indicators from the initial 4 to about 6, major parameters that, with the major pillars using to judge state performances. The first and the most important, based on PEBEC's based on customer feedback or private sector feedback, the most important of all the different indicators was and is infrastructure. Second is a secure and stable environment. Third will be transparency and accessibility of information. Fourth will be regulatory environment. Fifth will be skills and labor. And sixth would be economic opportunities. So each state of the federation has been rated on a 10-point scale across these 6 indicators, which provide the basis for calculating the 2023 ease of doing business score for each of the states. So out of the 6 indicators, infrastructure and security accounted for, the biggest pain point. So if we see our policymakers and our state government, put in a lot of investment to try to, up their infrastructure, to up security, and even up power, they would see a general consensus, in the states as to an improved ease of doing business, in their own state. Where businesses are satisfied with electricity, there is a very high likelihood that the overall satisfaction with the ease of doing business would be high. And where states or businesses are not satisfied with electricity, the ranking of that state on EOD would be very, very low. So if you can increase your daily power supply by 4 or 5 hours, this would definitely translate to about 1.5 or 2 point increase in ease of doing business rankings in your states. And even with the recent assent of the president on deregulation or devolution of powers to state governments to generate and distribute its electricity, this should, make it more possible for states to constitutionally begin to supply power to its own citizens in order to, make for a more conducive environment for businesses, in the state. So from here, we're going to be looking at continuing the videos and some video clips by the special assistant to the president on ease of doing business in the person of Dr. Jomoke Adewale. So we're going to be looking at some videos and some documentaries by her, explaining this most recent 2023 publication by PEBEC on ease of doing business at the subnational levels, including FCT, for her to throw more light on some nitty-gritties that we all need to understand, which was responsible for the rankings in the state. But finally, we're going to just call out the top 10 states in the country based on PEBEC's ease of doing business ranking. So first on the list is Gombe State, and it has done a very good job in maintaining its position at first. If you compare with the 2021 publication by PEBEC. Second is Jigawa State. Third is Sokoto. So last in 2021, pardon me, Sokoto was second, Jigawa was third, so they've just swapped places. Okay, fourth we have Kebbi, fifth Katsina, sixth Bauchi, seventh Anambra, eighth Kaduna, ninth Yobe, 10th Plateau, 11th Adamawa, 12th Taraba, 13th Imo, 14th Ekiti, 16th River State, 17th Kano, 18th Osun, 19th Akwa Ibom, 20th Ondo, 21 Zamfara, 22 Abia State, 23 Borno State, 24 Benue State, 25 Bayelsa State, 26 Niger State, 27 Nasarawa State, 28 Kwara State, 29th Oyo State, and Lagos is 29th. And Lagos is 29th on the rankings. Now there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration as to why Lagos is 29th, and Dr. Ojomoke will do a very good work in explaining that in the remainder of the video. So do well to listen through and get the best that you can from this video. Please remember to like, to share, subscribe, and to keep tabs with us as regarding news pertaining to business development and economic development in Nigeria. Till we see again, Godspeed. So first on the list is Gombe State, and it has done a very good job in maintaining its position at first. If you compare with the 2021 publication by PEBEC. Second is Jigawa State. Third is Sokoto. So last in 2021, pardon me, Sokoto was second, Jigawa was third. So they've just swapped places. Okay. Fourth, we have Kebbi. Fifth, Katsina. Sixth, Bauchi. Seventh, Anambra. Eighth, Kaduna. Ninth, Yobe. 10th, Plateau. 11th, Adamawa. 12th, Taraba. 13th, Imo. 14th, Ekiti. 16th, Rivers State. 17th, Kano. 18th, Osun. 19th, Akwa Ibom. 20th, Ondo. 21, Zamfara. 22, Abia State. 23, Borno State. 24, Benue State. 25, Bayelsa State. 26, Niger State. 27, Nasarawa State. 28, Kwara State. 29th, Oyo State. And Lagos is 29th. And Lagos is 29th on the rankings. Now there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration as to why Lagos is 29th, and Dr. Ojomoke will do a very good work in explaining that in the remainder of the video. So do well to listen through and get the best that you can from this video. Please remember to like, to share, subscribe, and to keep tabs with us as regarding news pertaining to business development and economic development in Nigeria. Till we see again, Godspeed.
As I said earlier, we went to security and infrastructure, access to information, workforce readiness, and the regulatory environment. This time, the first thing was we then did a lot of feedback sessions with the state governments. What do you take out of the feedback from the private sector? And what do you have to tell us and share with us on what you've done as a state? So the deepening of the methodology inputs a lot of state information. We had an opportunity for states to submit their reforms. About 11 states participated in that exercise, talking about the reforms that they've been able to implement and giving us data that we could verify from the private sector. We also unbundled infrastructure from stable and secure environment. That was also feedback from the private sector. And we added economic opportunity because of what we were hearing from private sector around FX and access to credit. So it's a more nuanced snapshot, and it feeds into what states have said they've done, whether or not private sector have gotten that message and that information, and whether they've validated that those reforms were their priorities, and now the nuances that have come out of this report.
Technically, 6 pillars in terms of the parameters or the 6 indicators. They're basically just 6 around infrastructure. Each of them has got a bit of a subset within each of those indicators. In terms of what we've seen so far, and this is it looks like infrastructure accounts for about 22.8 in this pie chart I'm looking at on the screen right now. Infrastructure seems to be at the top of the pile.
It's very interesting. The mandate of the PEBEC is actually soft infrastructure, although the members of the PEBEC are Minister of Works and Housing, Power, but really our mandate is around regulatory soft infrastructure. But there's really no way to take a snapshot. Private sector agnostic, they really don't care. They don't care whether it's federal government, state government, local government. They just feel pain and they just feel, it's a bundle. So we had to take a snapshot together. So we had to ask them about infrastructure, security, and stable environment. Between those two, it's 41%. And then the other, and then the other 4 kind of split between 14-15% each, making up about 59%. So between those two, if states would just focus on those and work on those, along with the federal government, then certainly Nigeria's business climate. This is what you and I know anecdotally, but this is the data speaking to it.
Yes. I'm interested in why transparency and accessibility of information. Why are the states doing? Yes.
Yeah, it's the only indicator that actually went up, and the reason is that a lot of states have paid attention to having investment promotion agencies. They've had more stakeholder engagements. They now have more websites. It's really the work that we've been doing around ease of doing business. There are a lot more stakeholder interventions. Our team has been on tour at least 3 times around the country. And so there's a lot more discussion on social media. At least the effort is seen. It's really A for effort. I must say the states have really picked up the ease of doing business agenda since 2017. Unanimously, the NEC and the NGF have adopted this agenda, plus the FCT, and they've been working on it.
So I go back to these 6 indicators. Secure and stable environment. Does that speak to insecurity, matters of that nature? Because it looks like, from everybody's point of view, this is infrastructure still accounting for 22.8%, despite what everybody was saying about the level of security across the country.
You know, it's a funny thing. We're talking to businesses and we're asking them
with those
business-related questions. So we're asking them not about sort of terrorism or kidnapping. We're saying, in your business, did you make a report to the police? What happened? Was there a robbery on your premises? What happened? So what's that secure environment where your business is situated, that you get burglaries? So this is speaking to their business bottom line. So there's specific questions that are targeted at businesses, and I think they answered quite fairly and honestly what they felt. Some states even, some respondents even says, I feel safe where I am, I can't speak for the rest of the state. So also where businesses are situated, even if they have to pay more to feel safer, businesses are taking those decisions.
On the ground.
Yes.
So we've got to, in the stock market, you talk about the top gainers and top losers. I'm sure you know that. So, we have, okay, so you got the top performers and the main laggers. I quickly went through the report and I was looking at the map of Nigeria. I was going to say, oh, hold on a second. Okay, so here we go. In terms of the top performers.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, and we get this question a lot. Gombe has retained the top position for the second time. Yes,
that's, I'm looking at the map of Nigeria now. It's somewhere in the north.
It's in the northeast.
Northeast, yes.
And Jigawa has moved up to second. They were third before. They just switched places with Sokoto. So what we see is northeast and northwest doing quite well. Now, it sounds counterintuitive to many people, but actually not to us at the PEBEC Secretariat, because this is one thing we've known for quite a while. When there is less complexity in an economy, if you do the work, then it's much easier to give satisfaction to the businesses around you. So if you take the global rankings, you would have Singapore, you would have New Zealand topping the charts. You would never have a US topping the charts. You wouldn't. So what we say, because there's more complexity. So what we say, and there's a bigger, economy. So what we say is that at the global level, if you're top 50, your business environment is decent. It's fine for your private sector to thrive. If it's on the African continent, you see Mauritius, Rwanda topping the charts. So naturally, it makes sense when you come to Nigeria, if the smaller economy puts in the work, then they come out gold. It's just the way it is. So it's the larger economies, because you see where is our GDP drawn from. If you look at, if you disaggregate the states into GDP, if the larger economies also put in the work, it may be tougher because they're larger, there's more complexity, there are more people to satisfy. But if they put in the work, the private sector will reward them. It may be tougher, but that's why they have to get even more organized.
So that takes me back to the map of Nigeria in terms of the overall ease of doing business, satisfaction. So I'm seeing a lot of green shoots, but this green look a little bit, some look greener than the others.
Yes, so that's what I spoke about, that you see the northwest and you see northeast.
Yes,
specific states, not all states. So the states that are working on reforms, you wouldn't find all states. It's not even a matter of size or even it's really about the states that have, I can speak to the efforts that the teams that are on top put into their work. I mean, the Gombe State team, the Jigawa State team are really dedicated to this agenda, and it's paying off.
Interesting, a few other states that are a little bit in a light green, a bit around the middle and southeast, a bit to Edo State. What are the issues around some of these states that they need to work on, for example?
So the larger states, Kaduna is another very strong team. Nasarawa is strong. Nasarawa, interestingly, the score went up, but their ranking went slightly down because some other states overtook them. So that also plays into it. Who are your peers and what are they doing? With states like Edo, they've also done quite a bit of work, and we work very closely with the Edo State team. What happened with the Edo State is there's a power challenge, and the private sector marked them really quite down for electricity in particular. Now, when we say that electricity is an area that there's some state input, there's some federal input, but private sector don't want to know. All all they want is power. You know, so Gombe has about 10 hours, Borno has about 3 hours a day. So, I mean, but where private sector are very opinionated and vocal, it's a perception index. That's where communication comes in, a lot of communication needed to make sure that stakeholders know what's being done, know that the state is aware of the challenges, know that the state is working on the challenges, and sometimes even when work has started, there's a bit of a lag. We analyzed this data over a 17-week period. We made sure we didn't do it during election cycles, so we collected the data before election cycle, and we're releasing it now after elections have been announced, specifically because we didn't want this report politicized. What it is, and I try to get states to move away from being focused on the rankings. We have to rank them because that's where we get a lot of attention from them. We get their full attention on a day like this. We were over 100 analyzing this for 2 hours on a Zoom session this afternoon, and a lot of piercing questions, so we had to have a lot of rigor and make sure that everything was right. But what it is we're actually more interested in the growth in GDP for each of those economies, because that's where the rubber meets the road. So even if you're not a top ranker, if we see your score improving and your GDP improving and your private sector communicating verifications of the reforms, and that your reforms are particularly meeting the pain points, priorities, because we've had states like in Delta State, for example, implemented reforms, but their own private sector says those were not quite our priorities. Yeah, and all this is perception index is from private sector, and we had a lot of triangulation to make sure we solved for emotive responses. We tripled the amount of respondents this time at a huge cost to us actually. Last time was just under 1,000 respondents. This time is about 2,850 around the country. Very, very robust intervention.
If I'm the governor of Gombe State, I'll be on the road right now asking investors and flashing this report and say, hey, I'm number one, and then I can use that to talk to investors. But very interesting numbers. Thank you very much. The top 10 states you can see there in Nigeria, about chart number 6.